again, when we talk about the Metropolitan Police Department and the demands set upon our officers, while this is going on, we had a triple shooting up on Kennedy Street with 3 residents. 3 residents were injured as a result of a gunman recklessly firing at some citizens in the 600 block of Kennedy Street. That is unacceptable. It is unacceptable behavior. We have distributed to the community, and this is where the community has an opportunity to play a part. We don't think that this individual is a stranger to anyone in the community. In fact, we released his image. While he does have a mask on the lower half of his face, I'm sure that anybody in the community can look at this photo who knows this individual, who knows who he is. I'm asking them to reach out to the Metropolitan Police Department and contact us at 202-727-9099, or you can text us anonymously at 50411. Thankfully, no one lost their life in that case, but I can tell you when I went to Kennedy Street on Saturday and spent several hours up there with members of my family, my son, my mother-in-law, checking in with some of the businesses, talking to residents up there, some of the things that I heard were very disturbing to me when it comes to just the reckless regard that some people in community have for law-abiding citizens. And I think that that is something that we all can focus on. That is a space where we all can participate, regardless of what your area of discipline is in this ecosystem. We all have a responsibility in this space to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to hold violent criminals accountable. I should add, with respect to the guy who was arrested for coming out of the apartment building with the firearm, the felon in possession. His case was presented. That individual, probable cause was found. Probable cause was found that our officers made a good case, but unfortunately that individual has been already released back out in community. I think he went to the hospital or something, but those are the kind of things that we're talking about when I talk about accountability in community and making sure that we are all really focused on doing our part. Chief Contee is going to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to take violent criminals off the street. In fact, this weekend alone, if you minus out the 6 guns that the sniper had, members of the Metropolitan Police Department recovered 40 illegal firearms in our city just this weekend. That number alone should make every person in this room cringe. 40 illegal firearms, and I assure you that this is as a result of hard work by officers going to get those firearms, because surely nobody just walked up and here are 40 firearms. These are encounters that our police officers had safely had, and there was an incident where we actually had to use a firearm this weekend where we encountered an armed individual who had shot another resident in the 800 block of Crittenden Street. But again, our officers showed up and they did their job on that particular day. Unfortunately, someone lost their life in that. But these are the dangers that our police officers are faced with as we try to tackle this issue of violent crime in our communities. It's about going out here. It's about being brave despite the things that we face, despite the shortages in staffing and all of those things that we talk about. These officers are out here every day, and they're trying to make sure it happens. They're trying to keep the citizens of the District of Columbia safe by making arrests and taking bad guys off the street. That's what we do. Next slide. So there are several other cases that happen, and I'm just going to highlight a few. And as I was, talking to members of my team over the weekend, some of you know I was away. I flew back to get back here just because of some of the issues that we were seeing. And I mean, I wish I could categorize this some other way, other than to just simply say that the level of ridiculousness that we are seeing in some of these instances. There was a man in a wheelchair shot in the 7,000 block of Blair Road. All this, again, is going on while MPD is dealing with the triple shooting, while MPD is also dealing with the sniper on Connecticut Avenue. We have a man shot in a wheelchair on Blair Road. It's reported to us that that man got into some type of argument with 3 young men, and some person decided that the responsible thing to do was to shoot a man in a wheelchair. That is unacceptable anywhere. And I don't know what program we have for that. I don't know what people are expecting to see for that, but people like that deserve to be in jail because they have demonstrated that they cannot function in community. They cannot abide by the community norms that everyone in this room expects to live by. And when we identify people like that, we have to hold those individuals accountable. And what does accountability look like? I asked you that question. What does accountability look like to every person in this room and every person watching this? And are we truly seeing the accountability that we want? And if not, then why not? What does that look like? Who has responsibility for that? I decided a month or 2 months ago, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to be responsible for, and I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything that MPD can do. I can't worry about other parties in this. So many other things. We had a homicide this weekend, 700 block of Morton Street Northwest. There was a birthday party where a resident or a basement of a resident was rented out and rented out by the owner. And at some point, two men got into a fight. And of course, the only way to resolve that, a man stabbed and shot an individual to death at a party. Again, I don't know what program we have for that. But some people are not ready to be in community when they commit acts like this that make our communities unsafe. There was another shooting that occurred over on First Sterling Street. There was a guy who was there, a flagger, directing traffic. And traffic is backed up, and surely some people were upset about that. So, of course, a person on a rideshare bike comes up on the rideshare bike and shoots the flagger. Surely that makes sense. Or is that just another level of ridiculousness that we're talking about that we see in community? I'm sure there's a program for that. But again, you get back to how are we holding individuals accountable when they commit these types of violent acts in our community? We expect the police department to lock people up, and we do. And sometimes we lock them up more than one time. I am pleading with our communities and with our city as a whole as we focus on this issue. This is serious business and people are scared. And when people are scared, we have to take a different approach, a different look in terms of how we're doing the things that we do. Some of the violent crime that I want to talk about really quickly. We went back and we did a look at violent crime going back to 2014, looking up to 2022. And when you talk about overall violent crime, you go back to like 2014, the numbers of violent crimes overall for the last 8 years has actually decreased. But the number of violent crimes in the space of gun crime, since the pandemic, since 2020, those numbers have continued to increase in 2020 as well as in 2021. And that is an area of concern. It's an area of concern for me. It's an area of concern, I'm sure, for many community members. When we look at violent crime across the board, right now in the District of Columbia, we are 263 violent crimes over where we were the same time last year. Now, many of those crimes, when we talk about over, we're talking in the space of robbery, right? That accounts for the majority of those numbers that are over, because our homicide numbers, as of today, MPD is experiencing a 10% reduction as of today. We're at 53 homicides compared to 59 homicides. And while every person in this room has certainly heard me say before, one is one too many in any neighborhood. I don't care where it is. So whether we're talking about 53, 52, 51, those are people at the end of the day. All of those numbers, those are people behind every last one of those numbers. So, I don't get too caught up, oh, we got 5 left, 6 left, whatever, but I certainly know that if we were 7 over or 8 over, whatever, that also would be the story. But that's the real number in terms of where we are as of today. Where crimes are really showing up are in the space, as I mentioned before, of robberies. And that trend started at the very beginning of the year. The interesting thing about this robbery trend, while it did start up very high at the beginning of the year, we're also starting to see that number, the robbery number, trend downward, which is a good thing. We're starting to see the robbery number trend downward a little bit, starting from looking at where we were in January to now. But I can tell you, when you talk about the firearms that are on the street, when you talk about what we're seeing, that number is not letting up. We're already this year 50% over the firearms that we recovered last year. Already, and we're only in the month of April. That's the work of the Metropolitan Police Department right now. We're already 50% over. We're almost at 1,000 firearms recovered this year so far. That is a significant increase in the number of illegal firearms that we're seeing in our city. When you talk about carjackings, carjackings so far for the year, we've had 165 carjackings. 75% of those carjackings involve somebody armed with a gun. 75% of those cases. If there is any good news that come out of that, is that the MPD has closed by arrest 60 of the 165 carjacking cases, or 36% of the carjacking cases. And when you look at what our closure rate is for robbery, the national average for the closure rate of robbery is about 24%. MPD is at 26% closure rate for robberies. I want them all to be closed, but let's understand really the context in which we're dealing with. When you have somebody that gets robbed and the person has a mask over their face, or they have a hood on or something like that, sometimes identifying the person responsible can be very difficult to do. Right? So sometimes we're not able to close cases out in those instances where identification is very hard to make. But when you see something like what happened the other day, when we have a 13-year-old that gets charged with, multiple carjackings, multiple armed robberies, when those kinds of things happen, I mean, he's only one of many other cases in that space where we've had a few individuals charged with committing a whole lot of crime. Very recently, we had two brothers, and that was a very high-profile case where these two brothers were responsible for committing several robberies of establishments in our city. One of the locations you might remember was at Busboy and Poets, where they went in with firearms and everything. These two brothers were arrested, but they also committed carjacking. So I just say in that space that there's a lot of work, a lot of investigative work that's gone into that 26% closure rate for robberies, but there's still a lot more work to be done. I want to update you really quickly on one of the initiatives that we kicked off that we feel it's paying dividends for us, and that's in the space of our homicide reduction partnership. So far, we announced that back in the early part of March. Actually in February leading into March, but overall there's been a 24% decrease in violent crime in the homicide reduction partnership areas, to include a 67% decrease in homicides. So we had 9 homicides in the HRP areas in 2021. In 2022, we're down to 3 homicides in those areas. 6D Sector 3 has had a 26% decrease. 7D Sector 3 has had a 21% decrease. So we are headed in the right direction in our homicide reduction partnership areas, but I want to focus on the word partnership just for a hot second, because what I've seen, and that's part of the reason why we're here today, to talk about partnership, the places that we have had the most success is when we are partnered with our law enforcement partners, partnered with community. In those spaces, we're able to do some incredible things. And when I think back to when we closed out the case involving Mellon and MLK, and when Nia Courtney was murdered, that was a partnership case that really, working with community members, working with our federal partners, that really helped us along the way. When I think about the serial homeless shooter very recently, that was a partnership case where we worked together and we did some great things. We got another great case that's coming up where we're looking at a lot of indictments that we'll be talking about in the very near future, that's as a result of partnership that's happening. When I think about the Maserati guy shooter that we caught over in Costa Rica, all these things happen as a result of partnership. So in a space where we have a workforce that is not at maximum capacity, I think the best thing for us to do going forward is really build on the partnerships that we have. We have a partnership with Prince George's County Police Department as we work on our carjackings, and we have seen an incredible amount of results in that space in terms of these guys really making inroads in a lot of the cases. So we want to build on partnership. So today we have here with us our partners from ATF, DEA, FBI, or FBI is not here right now, but U.S. Marshals are here. And we're going to talk about partnership a little bit. I think about the fentanyl overdoses that we had down in the Southwest. That case closed, those cases closed, those lives that were lost as a result of who sold those folks fentanyl was closed as a result of partnership, right? Those are important things, and we have to build on that. if the MPD is not at 4,000 or whatever number we feel it should be as a community, if we're not at that number, how do we expand on the partnerships that we have to get the most bang for our buck that's going to have impact in community? And the way that we're going to do that is through our violent crime impact teams. So right now, the violent crime impact teams, and I'll turn the mic over to these guys in a second, but really what we wanted to do, we wanted these individuals sitting side by side with MPD officers. We really kind of already had the model for this, but let's put these guys in a space where, in addition to operating in the homicide reduction partnership areas, but in other areas where we see these acute issues popping up, we have the flexibility to move these individuals around, to focus in on crime, and to do it in spaces where you know, there needs to be an intense focus, or to do it in spaces where there is some leverage for our federal partners that they can kind of bring to the table to help us with these investigations. So I'm going to pause right there.